If you're enjoying this tale from the Wild West, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories from the frontier. Your support helps us bring these legendary tales to life every week. The dusty town of Copper Creek had seen many hangings, but none quite like this one. Margaret Sullivan stood on the wooden platform, her hands bound behind her back, facing a crowd of angry townsfolk. The noose swayed gently in the morning breeze above her head. "I am a teacher, not a thief," she cried out, her voice carrying across the silent square. The accusation had come swift and merciless. $300 had vanished from the bank, and somehow all evidence pointed to the young school mom who had arrived in town just 6 months prior. Sheriff Henderson adjusted his hat nervously. He had never hanged a woman before, especially not one who taught the town's children their letters and numbers, but the evidence was damning. The money had disappeared the same day Margaret had made her weekly deposit of school funds. The banker, Mr. Cornelius, stood at the front of the crowd, his face grim but determined. "The money was found in her schoolhouse desk drawer," he announced to the gathered townspeople, "hidden beneath her lesson plans and personal belongings." Margaret's eyes blazed with fury and desperation. "Someone placed it there. I would never steal from this community. These children, this town, they mean everything to me." Her voice cracked with emotion as she spotted several of her young students in the crowd, their faces streaked with tears. The town preacher stepped forward, Bible in hand. "Do you have any last words, Miss Sullivan?" His voice was gentle but resigned. Even he seemed to believe in her guilt, though his heart clearly ached for what was about to transpire in this God-forsaken place. "I swear on my mother's grave I am innocent," Margaret shouted, her voice carrying across the desert wind. "The real thief walks among you, watching this injustice unfold. May God forgive you all for what you're about to do to an innocent woman." Just as Sheriff Henderson reached for the lever that would open the trapdoor beneath Margaret's feet, the sound of approaching hoofbeats echoed through the town square. Every head turned toward the main street as a lone rider emerged from the morning dust and heat. The stranger sat tall in his saddle, a weathered black hat pulled low over his eyes. Twin Colt revolvers hung from his hips, and a Winchester rifle rested across his saddle horn. His horse, a magnificent black stallion, snorted and pawed the ground as its rider surveyed the scene. "Hold your horses there, Sheriff," the newcomer called out, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. He dismounted with fluid grace, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the dusty ground. The crowd instinctively parted as he approached the gallows. Sheriff Henderson's hand moved closer to his sidearm. "This is none of your business, stranger. We're conducting a legal execution here," but his voice wavered slightly. Something about this man commanded respect, even fear, though Henderson couldn't quite place what it was about him. The gunslinger tipped his hat slightly, revealing piercing blue eyes and a face carved by years of desert sun and hard living. "Name's Jake Morrison," he said simply, "and I'm afraid I can't let you hang an innocent woman, Sheriff. Not today, not ever." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some recognized the name, others whispered questions to their neighbors. Jake Morrison was a legend in these parts, a man whose reputation with iron had spread across 3 territories. He was known as fair but deadly, a man who chose his battles carefully. "You got proof of her innocence, Morrison?" Sheriff Henderson asked, his voice gaining strength. "Because we got all the proof we need of her guilt right here." He gestured toward the banker, who nodded and stepped forward with a leather satchel. Jake's eyes never left the sheriff's face. "I got something better than proof, Henderson. I got the truth." He reached slowly into his vest pocket, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. From within, he produced a crumpled telegram and held it up for all to see. "Received this wire 3 days ago from the Territorial Marshal's office," Jake announced, his voice carrying across the now silent square. "They've been tracking a band of thieves working their way through small towns, just like this one. Professional job, they said." The banker's face went pale, but he quickly recovered his composure. That proves nothing, Cornelius sputtered. The money was found in her possession. What more evidence do you need? But sweat was beginning to bead on his forehead, despite the morning chill. Jake smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. Well now, that's where things get interesting, Mr. Cornelius. See, the marshal's wire described the gang's method perfectly. They plant evidence on innocent folks to throw suspicion off themselves while they make their escape. Margaret's heart leapt with hope for the first time since her arrest. Please, she called down from the gallows, listen to him. I've been telling you all along that someone planted that money in my desk. I would never betray the trust you've placed in me. The crowd began to murmur amongst themselves, doubt creeping into their voices. Some of the parents whose children Margaret taught began to look uncertain about the proceedings. They had seen her dedication, her genuine care for their young ones' education and welfare. Jake stepped closer to the platform, his hand resting casually on his gun belt. Sheriff, I suggest you take a real close look at who had access to that schoolhouse. Who knew the teacher's habits well enough to plant evidence without being seen? Sheriff Henderson's eyes narrowed as he began to consider the gunslinger's words. You're suggesting someone in this town framed Miss Sullivan? That's a serious accusation, Morrison. You better be prepared to back up your words with more than just speculation and Marshall's telegrams. Oh, I intend to, Jake replied calmly. He turned to face the banker directly. Mr. Cornelius, you seem mighty eager to see this woman hang, mighty eager for a man who's supposedly the victim of her theft. Most folks would want to recover their money first, ask questions second. Cornelius's face flushed red with anger. I resent your implication, stranger. I've been a pillar of this community for over 15 years. My reputation is beyond reproach. But his voice cracked slightly, and several townspeople began to exchange meaningful glances with their neighbors. Jake's smile grew wider, more predatory. 15 years, you say? That's interesting. Because according to this telegram, the territorial marshal's been tracking suspicious bank activities in towns along this very route. Towns where respected bankers suddenly reported thefts right before mysterious strangers rode into town. The crowd's murmur grew louder, more agitated. Some began to turn suspicious eyes toward Cornelius, while others remained focused on Margaret, still standing on the gallows with the noose around her neck, her life hanging by the thread of this stranger's intervention. This is preposterous, Cornelius shouted, his composure finally cracking completely. I won't stand here and be accused by some drifting gunman who probably works with the very criminals he claims to be tracking. Sheriff, do your duty and hang this thief before we have more chaos. But Jake was already moving, his hand dropping to his gun with practiced ease. I wouldn't reach for that hideout gun if I were you, Cornelius, he said quietly, his voice carrying deadly menace. The banker's hand froze halfway to his vest pocket, where the outline of a small pistol was now visible. Sheriff Henderson drew his own weapon, but found himself caught between two men, uncertain of who represented the law and who represented chaos. Everybody just hold on now, he called out, sweat dripping down his face. Let's settle this like civilized people, not like animals. Margaret watched the standoff develop below her, hope and terror warring in her chest. Her life depended on this mysterious gunslinger's ability to prove her innocence, but she could see that violence was only moments away. The crowd had grown restless, some backing away from the potential gunfight. Sheriff, Jake said without taking his eyes off Cornelius, I suggest you search that man's office real careful-like. Check behind false walls, under floorboards, anywhere a man might hide stolen money. I'm betting you'll find more than just $300. The banker's face went white as bleached bone. You have no authority to order such a search. He protested, but his voice was weak now, desperate. This is nothing but wild accusations from a known gunfighter and killer. Why are you listening to him instead of upholding justice? Jake's laugh was cold as winter wind. Justice? You call hanging an innocent woman justice? I call it murder, plain and simple. His hand hovered over his gun, ready to draw at the first sign of trouble from either the banker or anyone else who might oppose him. "I've seen enough," Sheriff Henderson announced suddenly, holstering his weapon. "Cut her down, boys. We're going to search that bank from top to bottom before we hang anybody." Several men moved toward the gallows to free Margaret, relief evident on their faces. "Thank God," Margaret whispered, as the noose was lifted from her neck and her bonds were cut. She rubbed her wrists where the rope had chafed, never taking her eyes off the man who had saved her life. "Thank you, Mr. Morrison. I don't know how I can ever repay you." Jake tipped his hat to her. "No thanks necessary, ma'am. Just doing what any decent man would do." But his attention remained focused on Cornelius, who was now backing toward his horse, panic clear in his movements. "Going somewhere, banker?" The search of the bank revealed exactly what Jake had predicted. Hidden behind a false wall in Cornelius's office, they found nearly $2,000 in various denominations, along with detailed records of his thefts from multiple towns along the territorial route. Cornelius broke down completely when confronted with the evidence, confessing not only to the theft, but to framing Margaret in a desperate attempt to deflect suspicion. He had been embezzling from his own bank for months, and Margaret's regular deposits had provided the perfect opportunity to pin the blame on someone else. The real story emerged over the following days. Cornelius had been gambling heavily in the neighboring town of Silver Falls, accumulating debts he couldn't pay. When his creditors threatened violence, he had begun stealing from his own bank, using his position to cover his tracks. Margaret's regular visits to make school deposits had given him the perfect opportunity. He had made a duplicate key to the schoolhouse and planted the stolen money in her desk, counting on the town's prejudice against outsiders to ensure a quick conviction and execution. Jake Morrison stayed in Copper Creek for 3 more days, ensuring that justice was properly served and that Margaret was completely cleared of all charges. The banker was sent to the territorial prison to await trial, while Margaret resumed her teaching duties with the full support and apology of the community. On the morning of his departure, Margaret approached Jake as he prepared his horse for travel. "Mr. Morrison," she said softly, "I need to know why you helped me. You didn't know me, had no reason to risk your life for a stranger facing the gallows." Jake adjusted his saddle and checked his rifle before answering. "My sister was a teacher back in Kansas," he said finally, his voice quiet. "She was killed by men who thought education was dangerous, who preferred ignorance to knowledge. I swore I'd never let another teacher suffer if I could prevent it." Margaret felt tears spring to her eyes. "I'm so sorry for your loss," she whispered. "Your sister would be proud of what you did here." She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small leather-bound book. "Please take this. It's a collection of poems I've been writing. I want you to have something to remember, that not all your battles end in tragedy." Jake accepted the book with a nod of thanks, tucking it carefully into his saddlebag. "You keep teaching those children, Miss Sullivan. The frontier needs more folks like you, people who believe in knowledge and justice over fear and ignorance. This world's got enough darkness without good people giving up the fight." As Jake Morrison rode out of Copper Creek that morning, the school bell was already ringing, calling children to their lessons. Margaret stood in the doorway of the schoolhouse watching until the lone rider disappeared into the vast expanse of desert and possibility that stretched beyond the horizon. The town never forgot the day their teacher almost hanged for a crime she didn't commit, or the mysterious gunslinger who appeared just in time to save her. Margaret Sullivan taught in Copper Creek for another 30 years, educating generations of frontier children, and never again facing questions about her integrity or loyalty. What do you think drove Jake Morrison to risk his life for a complete stranger? Share your thoughts in the comments below about what motivates a gunslinger to become a protector of the innocent, and let us know what other Wild West legends you'd like to hear about.